Due to YouTube's oppressive copyright laws, I couldn't upload this video in its fully edited state onto YouTube, or else it would get blocked worldwide. So, if you want to watch a version of this video that has scenes from Space Dandy and like things that are somewhat relevant to what I'm talking about, there's a link in the description to where you can watch the edited version of this video on Dailymotion. I mean, it's not the most editing I've put into a video, but at the same time, it's at least relevant, and there are a lot of sound bites and stuff in this that won't make that much sense unless you can see the video happening, so I do recommend checking out that version. But if you just want to stick around here on YouTube and watch it here, the full video will be here, except it's going to be set to footage of me and my friends playing the Super Smash Bros. Brawl mod Project M, which is a mod that lets it so you can play as like all kinds of wacky characters in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Don't ask me how to get this, just Google it yourself if you want to play it. Anyway, here comes the video. When a sci-fi series in any medium tries to invent all kinds of everyday use technology, it invariably ends up dating itself. A future filled with CRT monitors and giant cell phones is always going to mark itself as pre-flat screens and smartphones, for instance. Space Dandy, however, is atemporal. In its desire to be at once a futuristic sci-fi series, but also a throwback to the style of sci-fi pulp stories from the Space Adventure Cobra days, it elects to throw technology from different eras into a blender and create something that transcends time. Dandy's robot, QT, runs like an old hunky PC with limited battery life, outdated software, and printed out punch cards. Meow uses a smartphone to take pervy pictures of the ladies in the boobies bar that seems to be running on a totally modern Android OS. Dandy's ship can warp through space, but the teleporter is a quote old model that takes about as much time to transfer people from one place to another as a camera did to take pictures in the 1800s. The entire show is an anachronism. It's digitally drawn, but Dandy looks like he walked out of the 70s. Aliens range from looking like menacing planet-burrowing space worms to resembling adorable Pokemon. For that matter, it's aspatial as well, with simultaneous releases in the US and Japan, each with their own dubs, so that it can't be said where the show first aired. It's an anime series which transcends space-time to occupy a totally unique plane of existence. In Space Dandy, there's a seemingly evil, seemingly controlling force known as Gogol. They try to track down Space Dandy using the Galactic Street View. It certainly isn't a stretch to imagine that this is a parody of Google and how their company is taking over the world. My friends and I have been joking forever that Google is a villainous corporation hell-bent on bringing the world into a dystopian future where they control everything, and in Space Dandy it seems to have happened. It certainly works with the fact that Meow is running an Android OS on his phone, even though the build looks like an iPhone 4. The Gogol member's phone looks like an iPhone 2, but I assume Google has simply overtaken Apple at this point. Twitter apparently is around too, seeing as how Meow keeps posting selfies. The way Gogol tracks the Space Dandy crew's movement using Meow's Twitter posts is the kind of modern idea that you'd expect to see in a police procedural that wants to seem hip to the tech age, but considering this show takes place in a far future sci-fi universe, it serves as yet another anachronistic joke in itself. It's almost as if Space Dandy is somehow nostalgic for the present. This show contains a ton of short moments of unique key animation, obviously meaning that they've brought in countless key animators and allowed them all to go nuts with their own style. I'm sure some deep diving could get into a detailed who's who, but for now, the action scene in this episode looks almost directly ripped out of Birdie the Mighty Decode, which is one of the shows that Watanabe did a little bit of work on, likely by invitation of Akane Kazuki, whom he'd worked with since their Sunrise days. I won't be surprised if I find the fight animators from that show worked on this one. In each episode of Space Dandy, the evil conglomerate Gogol tries to kill and or capture the titular character. They consider him the most dangerous force in the universe and claim that as long as they can capture him, they can conquer the universe once and for all. Near as we can tell, Space Dandy should have no reason to be so important, given that he's just a loser bounty hunter who goes on random adventures. But when we consider that Space Dandy is also the title of the show itself, it becomes apparent that Gogol's desire to eliminate Space Dandy is actually an allegory. What Space Dandy represents as a series is unrepressed, boundless creativity. It's a production wherein a massive number of creative minds have been given free rein to express themselves on Shinichiro Watanabe's space canvas. In an anime industry that overpoweringly caters to its fan base, with few original ideas managing to break the mold, Space Dandy is one of the few places where the creators still rule. Gogol's spaceship is a giant Statue of Liberty head with a ball gag in its mouth. It represents represents the repression of free speech, which is exactly what Space Dandy stands for. In the first episode, Space Dandy's crew is killed in an explosion, yet all of them are alive again in the next episode. The timeline of events necessitates that the first episode is indeed the first and not the last in the timeline, as if to show that no matter what, Space Dandy can never truly be killed. Creativity will always live on. In its first half, the fourth episode of Space Dandy utilizes an interesting sci-fi conceit. In a universe filled with countless alien species, it's impossible to tell the difference between a completely new species and a variant of a discovered one. Machines shouldn't be able to turn into zombies, but in a universe where everything can happen and many things are inexplainable, it's hardly surprising when QT becomes one. However, the episode's real genius becomes evident only in the second half twist, when, after the Dandy crew are infected, it borrows a page not only from George Romero's playbook, with a nod to him at the end, but even from the ending of Shaun of the Dead. Dandy's declaration that being dead is no different from being alive says it all, really. After a cycle of craving raw meat, watching movies, and being horribly depressed, the crew's zombie senpai tells them that eating yogurt will make them feel healthier and more energetic. It works, of course. In a big Romero reference, zombies are somehow drawn to malls. Dandy uses an insurance policy he's taken out on himself to get paid for his own death, after nagging at the insurance company over an ordeal of time. The zombie talk show scene from Shaun of the Dead is almost exactly recreated, only now using the identity-hiding wall that is a trademark of Japanese talk show parodies. By the end of the episode, the entire world has been zombified, and all that happens is that the Space Dandy universe more than ever resembles the world that we currently live in. It's worth noting that just as Space Dandy and his crew are frequently killed and reborn in every episode, the Gogol commander chasing him faces a similar cycle. Nothing ever changes. Whatever I want to do is what I do. Whatever I don't want to do, I don't do. Space Dandy says this to Adelie in the show's 5th episode, but the show itself is saying this to the viewer. Episode 5 of Space Dandy is a big departure from how the show has been up to that point. There's no giant alien battle, no giant shaking tits, though Dandy does talk about them plenty, and no Gogol Empire goons on Dandy's trail. The plot centers around a super adorable little girl and Dandy's simple quest to selflessly reunite her with her grandfather. It couldn't be more simple or less absurd. Several minutes are dedicated to song montages of Dandy and Adelie just hanging out. It would be easy to see fans of Space Dandy get mad about this episode. Those who see Dandy as a throwback to a hyper-masculine, uber-wacky theme that may or may not have ever existed in history might be upset to see an adorable little girl voiced by the hugely popular Hanazawa Kana taking up so much screen time. As a fan of adorable girls and Hanakana, I'm not one of those complainers. I can picture fans crying foul, calling it a cash-in attempt to appeal to lolicon otaku. But Space Dandy reassures us, he wouldn't do anything if he didn't want to. He only does exactly what he wants to. I'd like to take him at his word. Cartoons tend to be pretty well defined. There's a series bible full of drawings of how the characters should look from every angle, what the core of their personality is like, what the core of the show is like, and all of the important things that have to remain consistent throughout the series. In this regard, Space Dandy is no different. The characters have one look most of the time and only really look different when things get weird. The same goes for the general art style and color palette. Even though Dandy does get weird pretty often, there's a definite sense of what the core of Space Dandy is. It's an amalgamation of comedy and sci-fi tropes and styles, and an experimental fun time for its team of creators. But at the same time, Space Dandy breaks a lot of rules. It doesn't try to always have a point, or have a good narrative structure, or make sense even internally. I always think back to that favorite phrase of college professors: you have to know the rules to break them. At its foundation, Space Dandy is a proper cartoon, yet it also is full with deliberately improper things. In a way, episode 6 has two parts. The beginning and the end are about Dandy's surfboards, while the midsection is an utterly pointless plot about Dandy and Meow failing to convince two warring aliens to find peace. Leading into the mission, Space Dandy remarks that the whole thing is indefinite, isn't it? I don't think Space Dandy is indefinite to the core, but it definitely plays with the idea of being undefined. Was this episode funny? Was it action or comedy or drama? Really, the whole thing was one big excuse for an awesome scene of Space Dandy surfing the explosion of a moon to the perfect music, and that surprisingly feels pretty okay. Nothing in Space Dandy is written with clear enough intentions to be called a deconstruction or anything like that, but the space race in episode 7 is obviously playing with tropes. In countless death race stories, there are a bunch of exuberant characters cheating in their own unique ways or just being and posing. Usually they try to capture the thrill and speed and passion of racing. Redline and Speed Racer are two magnificent examples. Comparatively, Space Dandy only focuses on the silly aspects, putting it more in line with the likes of Wacky Racers. And in a bit of a twist, Dandy himself actually cheats more than any of the others, even ostensibly murdering a lot of the other racers in his desperation to win. His rival, the Prince, is hardly painted any better, resorting to his own cheats to try and beat Dandy. In the end, no one even wins. Space Dandy is warped into an endless wormhole of the highest speed travel in existence and becomes the Buddha or something. I'm not sure if this is a bigger subversion of the racing genre or just the idea of narrative structure in itself. Shinichiro Watanabe's 3 episodic adventure shows, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, and Space Dandy, are mostly known for their memorable and lovable casts of lead characters. I think what makes Watanabe's leads work so well is that all of them manage to be at once immensely cool as well as immensely lame. They're always guys who do whatever they want, kick tons of ass and look cool doing it, but they're also always down on their luck, destitute and lonely. Watanabe seems to have at once a big appreciation for the masculine ideas of being a cool guy, but also recognizes how stupid and corny it is to want to be that kind of guy. His characters are like the anti-James Bond. As Film Crit Hulk writes in his epic analysis series on the franchise, James Bond represents the macho ideal of just getting everything you want all the time, being every kind of cool without any kind of fault. Watanabe's characters meanwhile get all of the swagger and none of the benefit. His characters are not glamorous in any way. They get to be cool at the cost of being happy. With Space Dandy being Watanabe's first straight-up comedy series, it doesn't quite allow Dandy himself to hit the badass highs nor the bottomed-out lows that the likes of Spike Spiegel or Mugen often did. Space Dandy certainly looks cool, and he gets to be cool at times, like when he's surfing a planet explosion, but nothing in his life is massively dramatic. He manages to get killed or go hungry a lot, but none of it seems to faze him all that much. That's the funny thing about Space Dandy. Even though he's this ridiculous character in this ridiculous world, he is also stunningly normal. Just look at the things that he cares about or gets invested in. He's at his most serious when he's trying to help a cute little girl reunite with her family, and when he experiences the death of an adorable dog. His biggest concern is getting to spend time in the Boobies restaurant. That's literally the highlight of his life. He goes out to capture aliens and make money just so he can go back to Boobies. He doesn't have any big goals or aspirations, nor does he have any real drama in his life. He's just a normal guy. Space Dandy isn't really heroic, nor is he really bad. He only wins about half the time, and usually just because his opponents are even more lame than he is. By episode 8, the flaming skull-headed leader of the enemy forces turns out to just be some cheapskate boss, and the Gorilla Man chasing Dandy across the universe is constantly undercut by his nerdy sidekick. They lose to Dandy without Dandy even realizing they exist. Everything in Space Dandy's world is at once colorful, amazing, explosions of adventure, and yet also lame, broken, silly, and strange. Even the storylines aren't written to be dramatically gratifying, but instead usually turn out to be something totally different from what the viewer first expects. Yet somehow this is exactly what makes Space Dandy so fun to watch. It's precisely the fact that it's taken all the coolest things in the universe and made them totally normal, lame, and ridiculous that it manages to hit the viewer in a more relatable and real way. I've always found it funny how human beings show far less interest in or respect towards plants than we do animals. Even though plants are living beings capable of interaction within their species and expressing states of being, they are so incomprehensible to us that we just can't relate to them. I remember one time when a vegetarian told me that their diet was restricted to, quote, anything without a face, and I found myself wondering what significance a face had in determining which life forms were worth consuming. One of the jokes in the background of Space Dandy is how in this insanely complex universe of countless possibilities, most of the aliens Space Dandy talks to speak with typical mannerisms, and almost all of them are equally interested in the breasts of human females. Space Dandy is a space fantasy after all, rather than a hard sci-fi story. But in episode 9, it actually dives into presenting one of the most alien scenarios that I've seen in a sci-fi series. It does this through putting Dandy and Meow on a planet inhabited wholly by plants. If not for the fact that two of the plants are capable of speaking Dandy's language and giving him a basic outline of what's going on, this episode would be totally incomprehensible. It's difficult to tell what the plants are doing or expressing or where Dandy is or what's happening most of the time, because the world is so alien and unrelatable that we just can't understand it. Even with our basic grasp of what Dandy and the plants are trying to accomplish, i.e. reclaiming this meteorite, all the steps taken to get this done seem like nothing to the viewer. It's very pretty to look at and all, but you couldn't possibly ask me to summarize what actually happens in this episode. It's a totally alien expression. Space Dandy is usually far too broad to really be called a parody, and it doesn't have a ton of direct references, but damn if there weren't a number of them in episode 10. That is definitely a gun cannon with Gao Gaigar's head inside of it. That is definitely Galaga. In a really obscure reference, Space Dandy pulling a rocket launcher out from behind his back looks exactly like the insane final scene of Takashi Miike's film Dead or Alive, which kind of blew my mind. There's also a rap about using Yahoo Answers, which slayed me as someone who regularly seems to find answers to random questions there. Anyways, this episode is the most blatant yet about its message. Meow's planet is obviously just modern small-town Japan, and his whole hang-up is over wanting to not stagnate living a normal life in a one-horse town. But as we will have already known before the end of the episode spells it out for us, the Dandy crew really just sit around and do the same old shit anyways. In one scene, Dandy declares that if tomorrow won't come, he'll just have to chase after it. But he's only so desperate to escape this planet so he can go to boobies, which he does all the time. If anything, he's chasing after yesterday. Even though Dandy says to Meow in this episode that the things we don't want are the things that happen, I don't think Space Dandy is a particularly pessimistic show. It recognizes the laziness and lack of ambition of humanity, but it relishes in the minutia of the everyday. It's less about chasing a big goal or trying to do something totally unique and different, and more about appreciating the things that make the everyday an adventure in itself. After all, no matter how ridiculous the scenarios in this show are, the effects that they have on the characters are pretty much the same. This is a show that is always reliving a new version of the same day, and tomorrow never comes. I think that there's more that episode 11 is trying to say than what I was actually able to comprehend, but in the midst of its confusion, I caught some cool ideas about the nature of what a book, or any other work of art, is. In this episode, a book-type alien is the curator of the universe's largest library. In a way, every work of art is a curation of the influences that go into making it. This could never be more true than it is of Shinichiro Watanabe adventure shows, which are always an amalgamation of styles and influences from all over the art spectrum. Each of his shows is a curated library of other works. We also learn that the book-type alien cannot move, think, or act on its own, but actually possesses others to do those things for it. This makes a pretty fascinating sci-fi take on how art happens, especially when you think of how many writers claim that they don't really create a story so much as allow it to manifest and live on its own. This is a literalization of that idea. The book is seriously writing itself. As defined by Wikipedia, in philosophy, the absurd refers to the conflict between A, the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life, and B, the human inability to find any. Narratively, Space Dandy is, perhaps more than anything, a theater of the absurd. Anytime it approaches the illusion of meaning, it is quick to break that down. There are maybe 2 episodes with clear messages to them, and both are mostly about how life is a pointless, repetitive cycle of sitting around. In its second to last episode, Dandy has an existential crisis at the realization that he may or may not be the original Space Dandy, but he quickly gets over it when he realizes how pointless it is to keep asking himself. As the opening theme puts it, life is 5 minutes of introspection. The grand finale is one big, epic love story about a vacuum cleaner who falls for a coffee maker, turns into a giant robot, fights a giant battle, wins nothing, and ostensibly kills himself by drinking coffee. He'll be back in season 2. Whether it's in the face of an epic dramatic struggle full of Bones doing the style of animation they do best, and Yoko Kanno providing the moving score that she's known for, or just in the face of Space Dandy's crew bumming around, nothing really matters and nothing ever changes. There is no inherent meaning to anything, and Space Dandy is entirely aware of this. It has nothing to prove, really. It's just a fun show about a dandy guy in space, and it is well aware of what it is.
Macho dandy bastard son of Randy Savage, Captain Kirk and Travis, touchdown, now put the clutch down. I gotta ravage some ramen, I'm a noodle connoisseur. Tip the waitress, got a noodle in my pocket for her. So rest assured, forget your real folk blues. I got the blue suede shoes, some groovy tunes in the tape deck, and check out my crew. My best buddies are a talking cat and robo trash compactor, vacuum cleaner, mop and sweeper, phone contact keeper, got a laser gun, a pompadour, whatever you could want and more. Buy my jacket replica on Amazon, I am a whore. When I'm on your TV, come and see me again. I'm just a dandy guy in space and I am blasting off again. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm a chest-beating caveman, nothing could be further from the truth. I'm a patron of the arts and the heart wants what the heart wants, and the best art is the architecture of a restaurant. Restaurant shaped like a chest to impress. My assessment is that I'm in heaven, need assistance. Wonder where the pulse of my wrist went. Quick send for a waitress or a naked nurse with your lips on mine, so my number is